I might ruffle some feathers with this video, but hey, you know, that's what we do. Let's get it. What's good, y'all? Terry Warfield. Hey, I hope you're having a great freaking day wherever it is you at. If this is your first time here, a big fat welcome to you. And if you're part of the fam, you're part of the squad, and you came back, hey, welcome back. Come here, dap me up, give me a hug or something like that. Hey, real quick before we move on with this video, I just want to say thank y'all for y'all support. We are almost, probably by the time you see this video, either right there close to 15K or at 15K. So from the bottom of my tight shirt and the heart underneath it, I really appreciate y'all and y'all support. So hey, what we making this video for? We trapped in the house. We just got 9 inches of snow today. We got to talk about why, even though I absolutely freaking love my a7S III, y'all know how much I love this camera, I still find myself reaching for my a7 III. What? How does that even make sense? Let's talk about it. Okay, so let me make some sense out of this, right? Because I know listening to what I just said, you probably looking at me like, Terry, you sound like a damn fool. And on face value, I could agree that I sound like a fool, but there is one big reason why I still reach for my Sony a7 III. Now mind you, I still think the a7 III is an amazing camera. As a matter of fact, I made a whole entire freaking video on why I'm keeping it. If you want to watch that super dope video, and it's a dope story in it, click right up there and watch that video. But the a7 III is still a fantastic freaking camera in 2020. However, I do feel like the a7S III has now taken the throne as my favorite camera ever. I mean, literally everything on the a7S III is better than the a7 III. Now look, before we get into the nitty gritty, I gotta ask you real quick, if you haven't liked this video, take a second, drop a like, and also make sure you subscribe with the notification bell turned on so that you get notified when new videos go up. Now, like I said, the Sony a7S III is basically better in every regard over the a7 III, with exception to megapixels. And this could be a pro or a con, I guess it just depends on the person using it, but one is 24 megapixels, one is 12 megapixels. So arguably for pictures, the a7 III might be better in some situations. However, some could also argue that the dynamic range, smaller file sizes and stuff like that from the a7 III is a better fit for, you know, content creators, YouTubers, stuff like that. I'm kind of 50-50 stuck in the middle, but one thing that I can't deny is literally every single thing on the a7S III is better than the a7 III. However, the one thing that keeps me coming back to the a7 III, besides it being a fantastic camera, is aps-c mode, crop mode. All right, so for y'all that maybe don't know what crop mode is, right? On the a7 III, because it's 24 megapixels, you can punch in or go into what's called aps-c mode, where you're only using a smaller portion of the sensor. You can run the camera at 10 megapixels. This has some pros and cons, which I'm going to talk about in 1 second. The other thing that you get is because the a7 III is a 24 megapixel sensor, the video is actually 6K being downsampled, down-res, downscaled, whatever words you want to use, to 4K. So with that being said, we can still punch in a Super 35 mode, or crop mode as we call it, and still get 4K because we had more resolution than we needed to begin with. In my opinion, this is perfect because 10 megapixels is still good enough for prints and stuff like that. Also, 4K is actually only 8 megapixels. So even in crop mode with the a7 III, you can still get a 4K image in crop mode. Now with the a7S III, you can still do crop mode, however you are limited to 1080p because the a7S III is not being downsampled from a 6K to a 4K, rather it is a 12 megapixel sensor, so it's running 4K natively, so you can't really punch in on it because there's no extra room to punch in without using quality. Now in photo mode, like I said, you could go into crop mode, but you're only going to get like 4 megapixels on the a7S III, which that's not really enough these days to do anything with. You can also run it in video mode, like I said, in crop mode. However, it is limited to 1080p. So what does all of this mean? What's the benefit and who freaking cares, right? So this is why I love crop mode on the Sony a7 III. There's 3 big reasons, right? Number 1 is lenses. Now, a lot of us came from Sony aps-c cameras where we were able to use the smaller lenses like the Sigma 16mm, which is legendary, the Sigma 30mm, all of these other third-party lenses, and all of these Sony lenses, which are made for crop sensor cameras. You can use all of those on the a7 III in crop mode. Now, you're probably wondering like, T, why not just buy full frame glass? Well, crop sensor glass is typically a lot cheaper and a lot smaller because it's made for a smaller sensor camera. So for us that still had leftover glass that was made for the aps-c cameras, we can slap that on the a7 III and run it in crop mode and still be able to get 4K plus 10 megapixel images. Now I know with the a7R III and the a7R IV you can do a similar thing with those, but we're talking about the SONY a7 III. So yeah, you can take all of those lenses that you have for your crop sensor camera, or if you're on a budget and you don't want to buy like the super cheap full frame lenses, you could get some high quality aps-c lenses for that same cost as the cheaper full frame lenses will cost you. Get what I'm saying? So there are advantages when it comes to being able to use the smaller lenses that are made for smaller sensor cameras. You can still run those on the a7 III, plus if you want to, you can slap your full frame glass on there and run those at full resolution. Here's the other benefit to crop mode or aps-c mode, and this is what I miss the most, which is why I still pick up the a7 III for general purpose stuff a lot of times, and that is because the Super 35 or aps-c mode, we now using a 1.5 times crop, so that effectively turns my 16mm lens into a 24mm lens, or whatever freaking focal length it is, we multiply that times 1.5, and now all of a sudden we have a longer field of view from that same lens. So it's almost like on the a7 III, lenses are dual purpose because we can punch in. Plus, once you combine that with like clear image zoom, you can really get some extended range out of that same lens on the a7 III. On the a7S III, you really don't have that same capability. Now, this is not to discredit the a7S III at all. I still love the a7S III way more than the a7 III. However, from a utilitarian perspective, for somebody that does photos and videos, a lot of times it's easier for me to just grab my a7 III because of crop mode and the versatility that it offers. Now, obviously the a7S III has its advantages, right? It's got a much better touchscreen, it's got a much better body, everything, you know what I'm saying? It's the low light king, 10-bit, 422, 4K, 120 frames per second. Like, obviously the a7 III is king of the hill when it comes to mirrorless cameras. However, in those pinch situations, man, I gotta admit, a lot of times I'm still grabbing my a7 III. So that's my rationale. I know some of y'all may not agree. I'm actually curious to know what you think. For y'all that cop the a7S III, like, how much do you miss crop mode? Am I the only one? Do I sound crazy, or are you with me and maybe you miss it too? And for those of y'all who are maybe thinking about picking an a7 III versus an a7S III, this is one of those factors that you need to think about when comparing features and stuff like that. The a7 III is still a fantastic camera. You can get one for around $1,700 to $1,800 now. Hey, it's still a good proposition, yo. So anyways, let me know what y'all think. I'm gonna be in the comments kicking it with y'all. Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, until next time, peace and chicken grease. I am out. Terry Warfield. Peace.